All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church, building community, inspiring growth, creating change. Here in the heart of Kansas City, we come together to create this hour of shared reflection so that we might be renewed in courage for these times and inspired to lives of greater dignity, higher purpose, deeper generosity, and more effective action. If you are new to Unitarian Universalism or to our congregation, we want to get to know you and share a part of your journey. If this place is already your spiritual home, welcome once more. We need one another, and it is good to be together again. Through the gifts of technology, we also gather virtually to celebrate community and connections as we lean into the values of justice, compassion, and reason. Welcome to all those who are joining us in this way today. Together, we learn the love that has the power to overcome both loneliness in the heart and oppression in the world. Welcome to our service this morning. May the words and music and images that we offer today nourish our best selves, calling forth abundant wisdom and love.
Arise, O souls, arise.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Excellent. Come on in, everybody. Welcome. Welcome. I'm Scott Hensey. I'm a member of All Souls. And we're here, and we're glad that you're here joining us in person or online. Now we have the pleasure of recognizing those visiting us for the first time. If you are a first-time visitor here to All Souls, please stand or raise your hand. Our ushers have a gift for you, so please wait to sit down or lower your hand until after you've received it. Lots of new people. Love it. Welcome. This Wednesday, there will be a celebration of life here at All Souls for Claudine Thomas at 3 p.m. You are welcome here with all the identities you hold and in your fullness as a person. We hope that you will bring your whole self to this time together.
Once again, good morning. We gather here today in space made sacred by the ideals and aspirations of those who came before us, who built this place and this community as a witness to their shared humanity with its hopes and delights as well as its struggles and sorrows. We are a people of heritage. A torch of light has been passed to us so that human freedom, reason, and dignity might continue to illuminate our lives together and be shared with all who seek their guidance in the unending quest for truth, for connection, and for meaning in our days. This morning we celebrate that inheritance and lift up the words of those who gave it form and voice, sometimes at great risk and dear cost to themselves, in a situation hostile to their ideas and to the freedoms that they claimed for themselves and others. It is only by remembering how we have come here and by what guidance that we can be faithful stewards of this inheritance, so that we may in our turn bequeath it to those who will after us carry forward the light and kindle it anew wherever seekers lift their eyes to more abundant life and greater human dignity. Let us be grateful for the lives and work of our ancestors in faith, and rejoice that we are entrusted with the heritage of the freedom that they won. In May of 1961, when the American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America celebrated their consolidation as the Unitarian Universalist Association, they sang a commissioned hymn that pictured the two traditions as merging streams. In a moment, we will sing that hymn together. For now, I invite Scott to light our chalice.
Here today, in this place, with these people, may we listen so that we can hear. May we hear so that we can feel. May we feel so that we can know, and may we know so we can change ourselves and this world. May this chalice we light our way. Please stand as you are able and join in the affirmation of our covenant, and then remain standing as we join together in song.
As tranquil streams that meet and merge and flow as one to seek the sea, our kindred hearts and minds unite to build a church that shall be free, free from the bonds that bind the mind to narrow thought and lifeless creed, free from a social code that fails to serve the cause of human need, a freedom that reveres the past but trusts the dawning future more, and bids the soul in search of truth adventure boldly and explore. Prophetic church, the future waits your liberating ministry. Go forward in the power of love, proclaim the truth that makes us free.
Please join me in letting All Souls youth and young ones head to their classes and special projects. Thank you.
Go now in peace, may love guide all your ways. Beauty be the blessings of your nights and days. truth on your lips and kindness in your deeds. Faith to follow where the human spirit leads.
Unitarianism, as a distinctive tradition within Christian history, owes its existence to a woman, Queen Isabella Jagiellon of Transylvania, mother of King John Sigismund, the only Unitarian monarch in European history. After his father, King John Zapolia, died when the future king was an infant of 6 weeks, his mother, Isabella, became the leader of the Regency Council that ruled the country until he came of age. One of the challenges that confronted her was whether to try to suppress the spread of the Reformation among the noble families of Transylvania, some of whom had become Lutherans, some Calvinists, and a few Unitarians. Reluctant to launch a bloody purge, and not knowing what the young prince's own religious preference would be when he came of age, she adopted the example of the Muslim Ottoman Empire to the east and issued one of the first edicts of religious toleration in Western European history. Affirmed by the Transylvanian Diet, or Council of Nobles, in 1568, it recognizes the legal status of Lutherans, of the Reformed Church, of Catholics, and even the persecuted anti-Trinitarians. It worked out so well that when John Sigismund came to the throne in 1570, the nobility requested that he confirm the policy to continue in force throughout his reign, which he did. The document became known as the Edict of Torda for the town in which the Diet was meeting when he formally made the policy permanent, but it was originally Isabella's idea. It established the integrity of individual conscience as one of the foundations of Unitarian belief.
This is an edict, this is an excerpt from the Edict of Torda, 1568. The word of God shall be preached freely everywhere. No one, neither preacher nor listener, shall come to harm on account of his religious confession. Ministers should everywhere preach and proclaim the gospel according to their understanding of it. And if their community is willing to accept this, good. If not, however, no one should be compelled by force if their spirit is not at peace, for their souls would not be satisfied. No one is permitted to threaten or imprison or banish anyone because of their teaching, for faith is a gift which comes from God. In the second reading, Florence David inscribed. You don't want this yet?
Not yet. All right. Give me a second to let them know what it is. Context is everything in these things. King John Sigismund died in a carriage accident, which may have been an assassination, during a hunt in 1571. He never married and had no children, so the throne fell to his mother's Polish relatives, who were advocates of the Catholic Counter-Reformation. They pledged to the Diet to continue the policy of religious tolerance, but quickly passed laws forbidding any further religious innovations. One of the Unitarian bishops began to question whether it was appropriate to address prayers to Jesus, and he was quickly thrown into prison in a fortress where he died as winter came on. He was buried in an unmarked grave and had been denied writing materials during his confinement. However, using the corner of a piece of brick carelessly kicked into his cell, he managed to inscribe a final message on the wall of his prison. In it, he lifted up having the courage to say whatever you believe is true as another building block of emerging Unitarianism. Jane, what was that message?
That message was, neither the sword of popes, nor the cross, nor the image of death, nothing will halt the march of truth. I wrote what I felt, and that is what I preached with trusting spirit. I am convinced that after my destruction, the teaching of the false prophets will collapse.
My elder colleague, Reverend Alice Blair Wesley, has taught that the implications of the offering are sacramental, and to dismiss them is a violation of our heritage. People suffered persecution and died so that we might have the privilege of freely and openly supporting our churches. Voluntary support of your church's holy purposes is a holy act, and it ought to be done gratefully and reverently. What if this institution, bequeathed to us by the labor and generosity of the past, was not already here? Where would we turn to hear the message of freedom, integrity, and human dignity? It is our turn now to ensure the persistence of that message for those who will seek it in the future. This morning's offering in support of the mission of this congregation will now be received with gratitude and reverence. Will you join me now in the words of dedication for our offering? We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society. There were, in fact, many centuries of persecution and uncertainty before the Enlightenment brought forth new interests in applying the principles of reason to the doctrines of religion. Unitarianism took root here in the Western Hemisphere as part of the flowering of democracy and freedom. As it began to differentiate itself from the Puritan Christianity of the original New England colonists, many questions arose as to whether these ideas qualified as being at all Christian, as well as how biblically based Unitarianism really was. Much of this controversy played itself out at Harvard, especially at the Divinity School there, which had been established to educate ministers for the Congregationalist churches of the British colonies, and where influential teachers kept spreading Unitarian ideas to future clergy, who then persuaded many church members of them, so that the congregations became effectively Unitarian, even though not founded on that basis. In the spring of 1819, William Ellery Channing, minister of one of the most prominent churches in Boston, took the opportunity of preaching at a young colleague's ordination service to lay out what he understood to be the essentials of what he called Unitarian Christianity, and to advocate for the use of reason in understanding both religion and Scripture as an essential element of what constituted the Unitarian perspective.
Unitarian Christianity by William Ellery Channing, written in 1819. It must be confessed, though with sorrow, that transient things form a great part of what is commonly taught as religion. An undue place has often been assigned to forms and doctrines, while too little stress has been laid on the divine life of the soul, love to God and love to man. Religious forms may be useful and beautiful. They are so whenever they speak to the soul and answer a want thereof. In our present state, some forms are perhaps necessary, but they are only the accident of Christianity, not its substance. They are the robe, not the angel, who may take another robe quite as becoming and useful. One sect has many forms, another none. Yet both may be equally Christian, in spite of the redundancy or the deficiency. They are part of the language in which religion speaks and exists, with few exceptions, whenever man is found. In our calculating nation, in our rationalizing sect, we have retained but two of the rites so numerous in the early Christian church. And even these we have attenuated to the last degree, leaving them little more than a specter of the ancient form. Another age may continue or forsake both, may revive old forms or invent new ones to suit the altered circumstance of the times, and yet be Christians quite as good as we, or our fathers of the Dark Ages. Whether the apostles designed these rites to be perpetual seems a question which belongs to scholars and antiquarians, not to us as Christian men and women. So long as they satisfy or help the pious heart, so long they are good. Looking behind or around us, we see that the forms and rites of the Christians are quite as fluctuating as those of the heathens, from whom some of them have been, not unwisely, adopted by the early church. The doctrines that have been connected with Christianity and taught in its name are quite as changeable as the forms. This also takes place unavoidably. If observations be made upon nature, which must take place so long as man has sense and understanding, there will be a philosophy of nature and philosophical doctrines. These will differ as the observations are just or inaccurate, and as the deductions from observed facts are true or false. Hence, there will be different schools of natural philosophy, so long as men have eyes and understandings of different clearness and strength. And if men observe and reflect upon religion, which will be done so long as man is a religious and reflective being, there must also be a philosophy of religion, a theology and theological doctrines. These will differ as men have felt much or little religion, as they analyze their sentiments correctly or otherwise, and as they have reasoned right or wrong. Now, the true system of nature which exists in the outward facts whether discovered or not, is always the same thing, though the philosophy of nature, which men invent, changes every month and be one thing at London and the opposite at Berlin. Thus, there is but one system of nature as it exists in fact, though many theories which exist in our imperfect notion of that system, and by which we may approximate and at length reach it. Now, there can be but one religion which is absolutely true, existing in the facts of human nature and the ideas of infinite God. That, whether acknowledged or not, is always the same thing and never changes. So far as a man has any real religion, either the principle or the sentiment thereof, so far he has that by whatever name he may call it. For strictly speaking, there is but one kind of religion, as there is but one kind of love, though the manifestations of this religion in forms, doctrine, and life be never so diverse. It is through these men approximate to the true expression of this religion. Now, while this religion is one and always the same thing, there may be numerous systems of theology or philosophies of religion. These, with their creeds, confessions, and collections of doctrines deduced by reasoning upon the facts observed, may be baseless and false, either because the observation was too narrow in extent or otherwise defective in point of accuracy, or because the reasoning was illogical and therefore the deduction spurious. Each of these three faults is conspicuous in the systems of theology. Now, the solar system as it exists, in fact, is permanent, though the notions of Thales and Ptolemy, of Copernicus and Descartes about this system prove transient, imperfect approximations to the true expression. So the Christianity of Jesus is permanent, though what passes for Christianity with popes and catechisms, with sects and churches in the 1st century or the 19th century prove transient also. Now, it has sometimes happened that a man took his philosophy of nature at second hand, and then attempted to make his observations conform to his theory, and nature right in its baskets. Thus, some philosophers refused to look at the moon through Galileo's telescope, for according to their theory of vision, such an instrument would not aid the sight. Thus, their preconceived notions stood up between them and nature. Now, it has often happened that men took their theology thus at second hand and distorted the history of the world and man's nature besides to make religion conform to their notions. Their theology stood between them and God. Those obstinate philosophers have disciples in no small numbers today.
While Channing and others were arguing strenuously on behalf of the role of reason, German Romanticism was renewing the popularity of what was known variously as sentiment or intuition as an essential aspect of religious truth. One who rode this newfound appeal to inner feelings was Ralph Waldo Emerson, along with others known as transcendentalists, who looked for the experience of transcendence as the credential of religious truth. Invited by the graduating class of 1838 at Harvard to address the future ministers about the profession that he himself was in the process of leaving, Emerson startled and offended the faculty by proposing that religion could not be taught because it was not an intellectual proposition, but rather necessarily a first-hand experience only. He went on to criticize most of the practicing clergy of his own generation for being cold and not inspiring to their parishioners, not because they were not well educated, but because they relied on intellect rather than feeling. While he alienated many of his colleagues with this claim, He also wove the transcendentalist insistence on direct experience firmly into the Unitarian Church as it would evolve in America, including to the present day.
Excerpts from Ralph Waldo Emerson's address to the senior class in Divinity College, Cambridge, Massachusetts, Sunday evening, July 15th, 1838. The institution of the moral sentiment is an insight of the perfection of the laws of the soul. These laws execute themselves. They are out of time, out of space, and not subject to circumstance. Thus, in the soul of man, there is a justice whose retributions are instant and entire. He who does a good deed is instantly ennobled. He who does a mean deed is by the action itself contracted. He who puts off impurity thereby puts on purity. If a man is at heart just, then insofar is he God. The safety of God, the immortality of God, the majesty of God do enter into that man with justice. These facts have always suggested to man the sublime creed that the world is not the product of manifold power, but of one will, of one mind, and that one mind is everywhere active, in each ray of the star, in each wavelet of the pool. And whatever opposes that will is everywhere balked and baffled, because these things are made so and not otherwise. Whilst the door of the temple stand open night and day before every man, and the oracles of this truth cease never, it is guarded by one stern condition. This, namely, it is an intuition. It cannot be received secondhand. Truly speaking, it is not instruction, but provocation that I can receive from another soul. Wonderful is the power of religious intuition, also called sentiment, to charm and command. It is a mountain air. It is the beautifier of the world. It is myrrh and incense, and spice and rosemary. It makes the sky and the hills sublime, and the silent song of the stars is in it. By it is the universe made safe and habitable, not by science or power. Thought may work cold and intransitive in things and find no end or unity, but the dawn of the sentiment of virtue on the heart gives and sustains the assurance that law is sovereign over all natures, and all the worlds of time, space, and eternity do seem to break out into joy. This thought dwelled always deepest in the minds of men in the devout and contemplative East, not alone in Palestine, where it reached its purest expression, but in Egypt, in Persia, in India, in China. This sentiment is divine and deifying. It is the beatitude of man. It makes him illimitable. Through it, the soul first knows itself. It corrects the capital mistake of the infant man, who seeks to be great by following the great and hopes to derive advantages from another, by showing the fountain of all good to be in himself, and that he, equally with every man, is an inlet into the deeps of reason. This sentiment lies at the foundation of society and successively creates all forms of worship.
By the end of the 19th century, Felix Adler had founded his ethical culture societies, and the orator Robert Ingersoll had popularized the idea of agnosticism as an intellectually respectable theological position. While New England Unitarianism tended to cling to its Christian and biblical roots, the churches in what had once been the frontier were openly questioning the necessity of God or Jesus or the Bible, while the more conservative East Coast congregations debated whether to repudiate fellowship with those who had abandoned what they saw as the essentials of the tradition. Reverend William Channing Gannett, minister of the church in St. Paul, Minnesota, saw the possible split between the two parties as potentially fatal to the future of a free church, and strove to interpret each to the other in ways that would make possible mutual understanding. His 1889 sermon, The Faith of Ethics and the Thought of God, is not as widely remembered as Channing's Manifesto or Emerson's Critique, but I cherish it as one of the first and most sympathetic defenses of emerging humanism as a legitimate legacy of John Sigismund and Isabella, as well as Emerson's Transcendentalists and Parker's Changing Creeds. In it, he defends the poetic imagination as a legitimate function of the human religious impulse.
I'll hope that we will circle back to Parker because he's wonderful. This is from William Channing Gannett, The Faith of Ethics and the Thought of God, which was written in 1889, and I will note that there is gendered language in this, which we have kept to keep with the history, but we recognize that all genders are to be included. But as to names for the divine, let those for whom the inadequacy of all words about the infinite dims truth say neither God, nor love, nor Father. Let such keep silence, and let their silence be revered as reverence by those who find the poverty of words less poor than silence to voice their sense of the mystery and blessedness. As reverently, let those who choose the silence bear with those who break it. Most certainly, the one that moves within the crystallizing atoms as in the rhythms of history, within the shining suns as in the light that lighteth every soul of man. Most certainly this omnipresent moral energy is not a mighty patriarch, is not the very tenderest mother. The fact transcends all human dreams of personality. Our many names, at utmost best, are only poems, emblems, symbols, idola to help the mind. Idols. Let the word be spoken fearlessly. These names are but idols of the mind. But know what idol means. The secret lies revealed in eidolon, the Greek original, an image serving to make thought more visible to consciousness. Man scarcely thinks except in idols. Language is one vast compact of fragmentary images. With this imaging necessity upon us, it does not long avail us to dismantle our cathedrals, whitewash frescoes, and forswear symbolism in the interest of truth. Man has a birthright to poetry and symbolism, and they will not be denied out of him. If denied in one set of terms, they are sure to come back before long in another. True, ever and again, we need our Puritans to denounce the symbol, to save from overuse and misuse of the helpful idols, to rescue us from an idolatry. There are today among us men, their whole heart throbbing with religiousness, who zealously deny our sacred names. Since it is morality alone that makes the God so real, so live, so near and dear to us, we ought to thank whoever emphasizes that supremely. These ethical culture friends of ours will deepen spiritual perception in us. They are prophets of the living God, whose name, for the God's sake, they would fain forbid to men, even as in elder time. For the God's sake, prophets forbade his graven image. But grateful for and not unmindful of their warning, we need not go out to dwell with these reformers in the dry lands of their prose. There is a nobler way. Let us be braver, and let us be fairer too. Say, Our Father, if you will, or Christ, or Madonna. Yet, saying these, beware. We easily may make them idols in a hurtful sense, mistaking form for substance. Forget not, they are symbols, and all inadequate to name the God we worship, the life and love in which we live, of which we are a part. Or refuse to say, Our Father, if truthfulness forbid you. But beware as much in that refusal, for to fear idols for oneself, or to rave at them in others, is still to fear and rave at idols. Mistake not thou the form for substance. To put both warnings into one, beware of deeming it either the essence of religion or the essence of superstition, to say God and Father. To think it either is to confound the names with realities. And that is the superstition. That is the sacrilege.
2 years earlier, trying to boil his thinking down to something concise enough to be politically useful, Gannett had composed a statement of faith to offer the liberal congregations of the Western Unitarian Conference that he hoped would also be acceptable to the Boston Brethren, so as to avoid a showdown between the two groups that might result in a permanent rupture. The Western Conference adopted the statement, but the Eastern churches were not satisfied. Ironically, this statement remarkably prefigures the principles and sources that would be adopted by the UUA a century later, after the consolidation between the Unitarians and the Universalists.
This is another excerpt from William Channing Gannett, titled Things Most Commonly Believed Today Among Us, written in 1887. We believe that to love the good and to live the good is the supreme thing in religion. We hold reason and conscience to be final authorities in matters of religious beliefs. We honor the Bible and all inspiring scripture, old and new. We revere Jesus and all holy souls that have taught men truth and righteousness and love as prophets of religion. We believe in the growing nobility of man. We trust the unfolding universe as a beautiful, beneficent, unchanging order. To know this order is truth. To obey it is right and liberty and stronger life. We believe that good and evil invariably carry their own recompense. No good thing being failure, and no evil thing success. That heaven and hell are states of being, that no evil can befall the good man in either life or death, that all things work together for the victory of the good. We believe that we ought to join hands and work to make the good things better and the worst good, counting nothing good for self that is not good for all. We believe that this self-forgetting, loyal life awakes in man the sense of union here and now with things eternal, the sense of deathlessness. And this sense is to us an earnest of the life to come. We worship, one and all, that life, when suns and stars derive their orbits, and the soul of man its ought, the light and which lighteth every man that cometh into the world, giving us power to become the sons of God, the love with which our souls commune.
Let me invite you once again to rise and sing in celebration of our heritage.
And shalt give our loyalty commanding. Heroes of faith in every age, far-seeing, self-denying, wrought an increasing heritage, monarch and creed defying. Faith of the free in thy dear name, the costly heritage we claim, their living and their dying. Faith for the people everywhere, whatever their oppression, of all who make the world more fair, living their faith's confession. Faith of the free, whate'er our plight, thy law, thy liberty, thy light shall be our blessed possession.
Now we release this flame, but the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fires of commitment we send forth from this place and carry them in our own hearts until we are together again. And I close from the words of a benediction used by William Channing Gannett's congregation in St. Paul. Now may the truth that is God illuminate our minds. May the love that is God fill our hearts, and may we be partakers in the life of all things, the life that is God, whose service is perfect freedom, whose presence is fullness of joy. So be it. Go in peace.
Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere. Its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love.